You too.
All right, Senator, we are live.
Welcome. I am Senator Sharon Carson from District 14, and today we are holding a meeting of the Oversight Commission on Children's Services. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting we are holding is in compliance with the Right to Know law. As the chair of the Oversight Commission on Children's Services, I find that due to the state of the emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and to listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that 1, we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube, and via phone by following the directions and links provided at the General Court website. 2, we have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. 3, we are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate@leg.state.nh.us or call area code 603-271-9631. 4, in the event that the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. 5, please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by a roll call vote. And finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where you are and if anyone else is in the room with you during the meeting, which is required under the Right to Know law. I will begin with myself. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Carson, and I am at my home in Londonderry, and there is no one in the room with me. Let's see, I'm going to go to Representative Rice. Kim?
Good morning. I am here and I am home alone.
Okay. Representative Litchfield?
Hi, good morning. I am at home. I am in the room alone, but I do have 3 children doing remote learning in their bedrooms.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Representative Altschiller? I don't see. Okay, Judge Susan Ashley?
Good morning. I'm here at my office in Concord, alone with the door shut.
Okay, thank you. Michelle Wangerin?
Good morning. I'm in North Conway and I'm alone in my room, although I may have children and a husband popping in at some point, which case that's why I would mute my video.
Thank you. Nancy Rollins?
Good morning. I'm in my home office and I'm by myself.
Thank you. Marcia Sink?
Good morning. I'm in my office here in our Manchester CASA office.
Joy Barrett? We can't hear you, Joy.
Oh, there we go. It wasn't
There
letting
we
me
go.
unmute. I kept clicking and clicking. Good morning. This is Joy. I am here. I am in my home in Nashua, and I am currently alone, although I suspect my college-age son will surface at some point.
Okay, thank you. Mary Ellen McKay?
I'm here at home. My daughter is somewhere around, but not in my office with me. My 2-year-old Shih Tzu, Bentley, is in my office with me.
Okay, good. Anna Kerrigan? Okay, I don't see anything. Myra O'Neill?
Good morning. I'm in my office here in Concord and I am alone.
Okay, thank you. And Joe Ripsum.
Morning, Joe Ripsum, Director DCYF, in my office in Concord alone.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Sharon,
We
you
do
missed
have,
me, Sharon.
I'm sorry, who did
You
I
missed
miss?
me. Deli Champagne.
Oh, I'm sorry, Deli. Please.
I am in my home in Concord and I'm alone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have to accept the meetings from the 11/20/20 meeting. Everyone should have received a copy of those meetings. Is there a motion on the meeting?
So moved.
Okay, moved
I
by
did.
Representative McKay, excuse me, Representative McKay, Mary Ellen McKay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Nancy Rollins. Okay, Nancy, okay. I'm just writing this down because one of the things we need to do is elect a clerk. Okay, so is there any discussion on the meeting minutes from 11/20/20? Okay, seeing none, I will call the roll. Senator Carson, yes. Representative Rice?
I will abstain since I was not involved in.
Okay. Representative Litchfield?
I will abstain as well.
Okay. Okay, Judge Ashley?
Yes.
Okay. Michelle Wangerin?
Yes.
Okay. Nancy Rollins?
Yes.
Marcia Sink?
Yes.
Joy Barrett?
Yes.
Mary Ellen McKay?
Yes.
Deli Champagne?
I'm going to abstain because I missed the last half of the meeting.
Okay. Okay, that's it. I don't see anyone else. So we have adopted the meeting minutes. The next thing I'm going to do, which we do have on the schedule, is to elect a clerk, but Mr. Ribson has let us know that he has a conflict at 10. So we're going to hear from him first, and then we'll go back and we'll elect a clerk. Before we start, there is something that I need to talk about. One of the things that has come to my attention is that the DCYF as well as Mr. Ribson are being sued by parties, and there is some concern about that. And so what I'm going to do, and on advice from the Senate attorney, is that if people ask Mr. Ribson questions, please be very, very careful about the questions that you ask. And if they skirt the issue, I will not allow you to ask those questions. Also, for Mr. Ribson's purposes, if he is asked a question that he feels he doesn't feel comfortable answering because of the lawsuit, he has every right not to answer those questions. So that being said, I'm just going to introduce Mr. Ribson, and let's talk a little bit about the
Senator
DCYF.
Carson?
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Judge Ashley. I just wanted to add to that while I'm not personally named, the court is being sued as well as part of the same lawsuit. So I would just put that as a point of clarification.
Okay, terrific. I see that Representative Altschiller has joined us. Also, I would like to, at this point, announce that we have a celebrity with us this morning. Mr. Ribson was awarded a national award from the Casey Family Services, and it's the Casey Excellence for Children Award, and it is a national award. So I would like to extend my congratulations to Mr. Ribson on winning this award. Congratulations. We're very, very lucky to have you working with us, Mr. Ribson. And I'm glad that you are being recognized nationally for all the work that you've done for the children of the state of New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Carson. A little I don't want to say embarrassed, but don't like to focus on myself in that way. But it was really, really touching, and a number of folks from New Hampshire, and actually a number of folks here were kind of part of conversations around that. So it's been really nice. I think we've accomplished a lot in the last 3 years, and it's been a real strong team effort, right? Where we've had folks from the legislature, from the child advocate's office, the courts, the parents that we serve, the advocates that work with us, the attorneys, service providers, substance use providers. I mean, everybody, Marty and CASA, and it's been a great few years of people finding a way to come together and just keep working towards a common mission. And we're making real progress. So that's been really, really exciting, and being recognized nationally for that is really rewarding. And I'm really thankful for the recognition, but more than that, I'm thankful for all the folks that just keep pushing along to keep making progress in the system. It's been a really, really great 3 years, and we got a lot more good stuff to do. So we're probably not even halfway done. So with that, I also want to thank you, Senator, for recognizing around the difficulties with the litigation. And we've had conversation with the Attorney General's office as well, and I was also advised, as you were, to try not to step into those waters in hearings like this. And then we have some other committee meetings as well where I think those types of issues could come up. So that's going to have to be something we'll just have to be thoughtful of going forward. So I think on the agenda, we wanted to talk about a couple things. We wanted to talk about progress towards Family First and the community-based voluntary services contracts that just went into place. So what I'd like to do is pull up some stuff on the web, because I probably won't have time to get super in depth, but I can get into some depth and direct people towards the right place to look for more information. So Family First, as folks here, I think everybody in this committee anyway realize, maybe not everybody watching realize, is really focused on two big things. It's focused on transforming your utilization of congregate care and trying to move that to a place where it's only utilized where it's absolutely clinically necessary, and not utilized simply as a placement for children who need a home, with the idea that children that need a home have a home and a family to live with, and that children who need treatment, clinically need treatment, have access to the type of treatment that they need. And we're in the midst of really designing that, of not just designing at this point, procuring that system. The process to design that system really occurred throughout the last legislative session and supported in the last budget through Senate Bill 14. And right now, the Division of Children's Behavioral Health has a host of procurements in place to push that forward. So what I've pulled up on the screen here is the request for procurements page on the Department of Health and Human Services website. And it's a place where folks can look to see these procurements that are live right now. I can't speak to them in detail beyond what's published right now, because that would interfere with our procurement processes. But I can talk in general terms about what these things are going to be doing going forward, and direct folks to take a look at those procurements to get more detail. The basic concept here started a couple of years ago with the idea that we needed to move our system from a place where residential care was just considered a placement for kids who needed a place to live, to a place where residential care was really focused on clinical treatment needs. And one of the first steps that we took towards that was actually structuring ourselves a little bit differently and moving responsibility for those residential programs out of DCYF, where really our focus is child protection and juvenile justice, and into the division or Bureau for Children's Behavioral Health, where their expertise and their focus is on the clinical needs of kids. So that occurred a couple of years ago with some of our staff that were previously with DCYF moving over to that bureau and starting that work and taking responsibility for that work. And then it really accelerated last year. I think it was last year through the passage of SB 14, or was the year prior, through the passage of SB 14, which was then funded in the budget that was passed at the start of the last biennium. And the key components in there were the development of a mobile response and crisis stabilization system. That is currently The key component of that is up for procurement right now. It is this RFP here, Behavioral Health Crisis Response System. I won't pull it up, but people can certainly go back and take a look at that later when you have a chance. Next key component of this is this concept that if kids are going to be entering residential care, we need to have a clinical understanding of what their needs are so we can make good decisions about where they go and what their goals are in order to succeed in that placement or that residential treatment and then be able to return to the community. And that's articulated here in this RFP for the Comprehensive Assessment for Treatment of Children's Behavioral Health. This is a requirement of the Family First Preventative Services Act, or at least the utilization of some type of tool to evaluate clinical needs is required. I think what we're putting forward here is a very thorough and robust tool that probably goes above and beyond what most states implementing Family First are doing. Our tool is based on having an independent clinician who's not part of DCYF and who is not part of any residential care system, utilizing both the Child Adolescent Needs and Strengths tool and also assessing using a psychosocial assessment of the youth and then making a recommendation as to whether a high level of residential care is necessary, and if it is necessary, what level of care is appropriate. And that's going to drive decision making about where children need to be placed. One tough spot that's going to exist here that I'll acknowledge right now, and it's going to continue to be a tough spot, but we're going to have to just keep working through it. And this was true in New Jersey as well, where we built a comparable system, was there's always some incongruity between the urgency of making a placement in child protection or juvenile justice. Sometimes you have a child who needs a place to go tonight, but having a thorough assessment isn't going to happen tonight. So you have to recognize that that reality exists, and there's going to be times where children are going to be placed in a setting while the assessment has to be ongoing, and that when the assessment's completed, we have to then use that assessment to validate whether that initial decision was proper or whether that initial decision needs to be changed, and this child needs a different setting. And as much as that is disruptive in the moment for that child, and I don't like that aspect of it, if you're going to be utilizing intensive clinical care for kids, you want to make sure you're utilizing the right intensive clinical care. And it's important that we get that child in the right setting. If they're in a setting that's too restrictive, that tends to cause decompensation. If you're in a setting that's not clinically intensive enough, that tends to not meet their needs, and they just end up staying in those settings indefinitely without ever having their needs met. So this is an important, huge part of it. This is live for procurement right now, closes next week, you can see. The next is the development of what's called a PRTF. That is a sub-hospital acute level of residential care for youth. That is more intense than anything we currently have in the state of New Hampshire. And when we find ourselves sending kids far away, that's typically the level of care that they're going to. When I say far away, I'm not just talking about the neighboring states, but kids that get sent to states, on the other side of the country sometimes, unfortunately. So the hope is that by building that type of care here in New Hampshire, we'll get to a place where we no longer have to send kids far away and they can stay close to their communities, because it's always important to be able to stay close to family and community if you're going to successfully transition back to family and community. And then last is the RFP to really redesign the existing residential treatment services. We had a vendors conference yesterday with Children's Behavioral Health, and a host of providers within and without New Hampshire showed up to that. It was a pretty active session. I think, I'm trying to remember, but it was somewhere in the high 40s, the number of participants in that session. So I'm hopeful that we'll have some good attention from some good folks that want to step into that space. But the basic idea here is to complete that piece that I was talking about before and help move our residential care system to really be clinically focused and clinically intensive enough to meet the needs of our kids. So the key focuses here are some requirements around all of the programs utilizing a trauma-informed model of care. Requirements that all of the programs utilize something called 6 core strategies, which is a nationally proven approach to reduce the need for restraint and seclusion within programs. Requirements that all of the programs become accredited by an accrediting body, which I'm sure Nancy can articulate that that's a substantial lift, and I think a worthwhile lift, but a substantial lift that our providers are going to need and have been receiving some help to achieve. And some additional requirements around the clinical programming, the clinical staffing, and the nursing staffing available to the kids in those programs. The idea is that by completing all of this work and doing all of this work on the residential system and on the way that we access residential and think about residential, we'll be able to drive down utilization of those systems, and that the savings, the whole theory behind Families First is that those are the most expensive interventions, and that the savings from driving down utilization of those types of programs can then be refunneled into more preventative services to keep kids and families from getting into those situations in the first place. So that's why the federal government made the Family First change, was in service of that ultimate goal. So that leads to the other big side. Actually, I'll pause there. Does anybody have questions about the behavioral health residential piece of this before I move into the other side of Family First?
Joe, this is Deli. I have a quick question. You know, I was listening to NPR the other day, and on the 1A show, they did a program about workforce development and the shortage of, clinical staff for behavioral health. And they said it's a national problem. Do you see that affecting this at all in any way?
I certainly think, I think really across a lot of the work that we're doing, workforce is going to be a challenge in the state. I think it's something that our providers experience today. It's something that DCYF experiences today. I think that, a big part of the RFP for, particularly for residential care, was around including in there, asking providers to articulate for us their plans on recruiting and supporting talent, and allowing the costs of that to be built into their rates, which is not something we've ever done before, and that I hope is going to help be part of the solution to that problem. But it is, as you say, it's a national problem. We're trying different strategies to try to encourage people to step into these fields and to encourage people to step into this work. But that is it's across all the social service systems challenge, and I think for some time to come.
I like that you're being solution focused. That sounds like a good, idea to build that in. That's great. Thanks for thinking of that.
Yeah, we try. The best we can do is try. I do think, at some point, if folks would like to go deeper into this, Judge Ashley has had the opportunity to have our children's behavioral health folks present to the judges on this kind of vision and the plan. And it might be a good idea for a future agenda if folks do want to go deeper into these questions than I've been able to go today. I'm sure they'd be happy to join a future meeting to talk about it.
Joe, this is Nancy. I think that might be helpful, because one of the challenges, I think, is that sometimes the terminology of behavioral health is described narrowly. Yet, as you know, we have children that cross the spectrum in terms of autism, intellectual and developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, and so forth, and how they're going to have their needs addressed in this comprehensive assessment, where they may need more neurological evaluation and other things. So some discussion at some point or presentation might be very helpful to folks.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be helpful. I will say, when we talk about behavioral health, I think it's intended to be the broad lens of behavioral health, which, when we were doing this work in New Jersey, we often refer to behavioral health to be inclusive of things like intellectual and developmental disabilities, substance use disorders, et cetera. So I think that's the intent of this. And the CANS tool that's used looks at functional domains. It's not just about diagnosis. So it is able to capture a lot of that type of information to inform, treatment and placement decisions. But yes, I think you're absolutely right. And we do need to make sure that we have a broad lens on the needs of our kids, and not narrowly focused solely on kind of your traditional mental health related diagnoses.
Joe, it's Mary Ellen. May I ask you a question, please? You just triggered a thought for me. When you're doing all of this, are you considering, or can you bring in an functional analysis? Because the functional behavioral analysis is basically where people are and what they can accomplish, not so much what should be expected, maybe chronologically or developmentally.
Yeah, I think there's room to think about where that fits. I'm not exactly sure what the answer is to where that fits right now. My thinking would be that if it's identified through the CAT that the tools that we've used aren't robust enough to get us a clear picture on needs, that a further assessment would have to be pulled in, and that would be the time. The CANS does touch on some of that functional capacity, but it doesn't go as in depth as the functional behavioral assessments that you're talking about.
Thanks, Joe.
Joe, one more quick question. This is Deli. Will the cans be done by the CMEs, or did I hear you say an independent evaluator would do those?
The way that the cans works, it's intended to be a living tool that you keep using over time. So the idea within this framework is that the independent CAT assessor, which is going to be independent from DCYF, independent from residential programs, and it's intended to be, although we haven't yet procured it, so that might be somewhat on the table, but intended at this point to be independent from the CME, that the very first assessment is going to be fully clinically independent from all of those. But the way the CANS is best used over time is that the people who work and know with the youth, or child, need to be engaged in that process. So, typically every quarter you'll want to update your CANs to be able to assess what progress looks like over time. And, best practice around that is to actually do that through your kind of child and family teaming meetings that would happen through the CME, where you have multiple people able to contribute to the conversation around what the progress has or has not been, and then use that to create your tool. So part of the really cool thing about the system that we're thinking about is that CANS tool will be available, with Follow the Child throughout wherever they present in the system, and be able to inform decision-making about treatment no matter where they present in the system, and create a common language across all the stakeholders. So right now, JJ and CPS and Children's Behavioral Health and Community Mental Health Centers, and everybody has different languages that they use to talk about these things. And if we're all using the same CANS tool to do it, we'll have a common language and a common place to have these conversations, these child and family team meetings through the CME that we hope will see improvement in planning for care and consistency of care. And then in a future state, if a child pops back up in another part of the system, maybe behavioral health 2 years later, they have that history that they can understand where the child came from, and they can understand what the system partners along the way have been able to realize and articulate about the child's needs over time, and use that to make future plans. But it is really all focused on needs and focused on meeting the needs of the youth, as opposed to focusing on punitive measures and things like that, like you would often historically see through JJ interventions.
Sounds great. Thanks, Joe.
Question? It's Marty. Joe, can you just, for those that maybe aren't as familiar, CANS stands for and CMEs stands for?
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
The CANS is the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths Tool. And CME is a care management entity. And a key part that I actually didn't mention because it's not actively procured, because it's already been procured, is the care management entity's role for children entering residential care is going to be to provide some ongoing planning and oversight to support that youth's transition back to the community, and then to remain with that youth and that family once the residential episode ends, to make sure that they're successful and they have the services that they need within the community. So there are two care management entities right now. One is NFI, and the other one recently changed the name, and I'm not remembering.
Connected Families.
Connected Families, thank you for that. So there are currently two CMEs contracted with the state, and we're slowly moving into this space right now, but this will all accelerate when the rest of the system is finally procured, with the goal of things really being churning by the time Family First implementation starts next fall.
Follow-up question. Will those follow these kiddos as they leave some of these residential facilities into, if they're going into foster care, normal foster homes or foster homes?
Yeah, the CME will continue to have a role to support the child's transition in the community. So if they return to their own home, we follow them there. If they return to a foster home, they follow them there. I think one of the things about this new system design that's really important is that the role of the CME is to stay with the child wherever the child goes, so that you don't have this disruption in kind of providers and oversight that kids currently feel today, and that you don't have to artificially keep kids in formal systems where they don't really need it, right? If the kid has behavioral health care needs, but the family is strong enough to function without child protection in their business anymore, then child protection should step out and let the family step in front, and the CME then being able to help guide that family through the services necessary to keep the child stable and successful. So that's really a big key focus, is making space for child protection and juvenile justice to kind of get out of the way when we're not needed anymore, and to let the family back in charge with the support of the CMA. Great. Okay, so that's the behavioral health piece, and I would suggest, maybe a future meeting, like I said, would be good to invite those folks to go into more depth. The other big side of Family First is around shifting our in-home services to families to try to keep kids and families from having to enter into this level of residential care. So people talk about this as prevention work. I want to be careful talking about it as prevention, because people think of prevention as being things like family resource centers and things in the community, which are very important, but are not really what Family First is about. When Family First says prevention, they're talking about prevention from kids entering care. So that is really a high level of prevention. That's really families that are known specifically to be at high risk, and how do you keep those families together so that kids don't have to enter out of home care. So if you folks who are familiar kind of with your prevention pyramid, primary, secondary, tertiary prevention, this is really that tertiary prevention space. So it tends to be pretty intensive programs for families who have some pretty high needs, and not as much as those primary and secondary prevention services, which are also incredibly important, but tend to be a little lower, less intensity than what you see in the things that are funded through Family First. And that plays out in a couple ways. One, to be able to be eligible for Family First funded services under the Family First federal law, the family has to be identified, or the child has to be identified as what's called a candidate for foster care, right? So the child's at high risk of entering foster care. And we're in the middle of crafting our definitions of that. That's for approval. We're trying to be pretty broad in that term to maximize the support we can offer families. But we'll see where the feds land on approving that at the end of the day. So the kids have to qualify as candidates for foster care. And then the services that the federal government will allow us to use federal dollars to support, and it's a match, it's not 100% federal funded, so there has to be a state match to all of this. But those dollars have to go towards evidence-based programs that are identified by the federal government on the Family First Clearinghouse as proven to meet the needs and achieve the goals of kids and families, and keeping kids and families safe at home. So we put out, folks probably recall, a year plus ago, we put out a request for information, solicited a lot of information from folks around what are the services we should be looking to build. We received 40-ish responses to that, which was, I think, a record for anything that DHHS has ever published. Got some really great information from that. We needed to go a little bit deeper, so then we held some focus groups and did some case reviews, looked at actual cases to identify which evidence-based models do we think are going to meet most needs of most kids, right? There's hundreds of these models out in the world, and we had to select which ones do we think are most suited to meet the needs of the kids and families we encounter here in New Hampshire, and what are the ones that are most practically speaking, that we think we can practically stand up. So we published in December, and I would suggest folks look at this. This is on the DCYF webpage that I just opened up. This procurement forecast, first time we've done anything like this. And in this procurement forecast, we kind of walk through, what I was just explaining, right? How did we come to this process of identifying what services are we going to procure in the coming years? The very first thing that we talked about here was community-based voluntary services, CBVS. That was contracted in November with 2 vendors. We received 16 bids. We landed on 2 vendors, Waypoint, who's serving the majority of the state, and the Family Resource Center in Gorham that's serving the North Country. The idea of this is to use 2 different evidence-based practices. One's called solution-based casework, another one's called motivational interviewing. And for this service to be for families that we identify through our child protection assessments as being at high risk of coming back into the system, but who are not yet at a place where we would go to court and file on them, right? So at a place where we know that there's high risk here, but this isn't abuse or neglect yet, and we wouldn't go to court yet, but we know that if we don't intervene now, that we run a high risk that they're going to be back and their kids aren't going to get what they need. So this service is going to be and every year there's about 2,000 of those families that meet that criteria. We use an actuarial tool to assess risk, and about 2,000 families a year come up as being high risk using that tool. And that is 2,000 families that come up as being high risk and who also are not found to have committed an act of abuse or neglect. Since this is voluntary, we are assuming, because there's not court involvement, we're not compelling families, they have to be willing to step into this. We're assuming not every family is going to go into this, so we contracted for a little over 1,000 slots with Waypoint and the FRC Gorham to open up basically a voluntary case where DCYF steps out and they step in and they utilize these two evidence-based practices to try to identify needs, meet needs, ensure families are stable, with the goal of being able to wrap up their program, their more intensive program, within 6 months, and then have an ongoing connection to a local family resource center or some other type of local supports to hopefully keep that family stable going into the future. That was the first of the RFPs that we put out. The next that we are putting out, one of which was actually published yesterday, are for multi-systemic therapy. That one was actually published yesterday. This is on the clearinghouse as a well-supported evidence-based program, and is really focused more towards our adolescent population with some more intensive behavioral needs. And these are the kids that often end up in residential programming in the state. So the idea is by having this type of service available to serve those kids in home, that we can hopefully meet their needs at home and forestall the need to have them enter into residential care. One of the things about MST that we all have to be cognizant of is it's a model that's designed to work very intensely with the family, right? So it isn't just on the youth to be able to modify behaviors that are a challenge, but it's incumbent upon the family to be able to engage in some really intensive programming. And when you look at MST and you look at when it doesn't work, that's often turns out to be the challenge, is that the family is not yet at the space where they can work as intensely as they need to support that program. So I'm very hopeful about what this is going to mean for our system, but I wouldn't suggest that it's some type of silver bullet that's going to solve all of the challenges. I think it's going to make a big difference, but it's not going to be the only thing. The next model that we're looking at is something called Intercept. This is also recently approved on the Family First Clearinghouse. This is a broader kind of utility program. MST is very focused on what it intends to do. Intercept is kind of more, people describe it more as almost like the Swiss Army knife of kind of intensive services for families, where it's a little more flexible, and how it works with families might be a little bit longer of a program because it is a little more flexible and a little less intensive on family time, helping to bring them into the space where they're able to be as intensive and intentional as they need to be to help support their kids. We do have a little bit of this in the state right now, but not a lot. There's a little bit in the southern part of the state, kind of an aura around the Massachusetts program that touches some of the southern part, but the goal is to bring this statewide. Home builders is the next one that we identified. This is a very intensive child protection intervention. Really, it's indicated for kids up to age 17, but it's most often used for younger children. And this really focuses like MST focuses super intensely around the adolescent. This is really focusing very, very intensely around the parent. So this is another program which we think it's very effective for the parents that are willing and able and ready to engage with that intensity, but we know that not all parents are in that spot at the time that they come to us. So it's something that we definitely want in our toolkit, but we don't think that it's as broad and who it can serve as a program like Intercept is. Healthy Family America is a home visiting program that is something that does exist currently within the state. It's funded by Public Health. But the model that's used is the traditional Healthy Families America model, which their evidence-based model is only for, they require that you start working with them while still pregnant or within 2 weeks of birth. Most of the kids that we work with aren't not yet born or within 2 weeks of birth. So it has limited utility in the child protection context. And what Healthy Families America did is they created a kind of an offshoot of it that they call the child protection or child welfare protocols, which extends that time frame out to 24 months. So children under 2 can start in the program and still fall within their evidence-based criteria. So that's what we're looking to do, is to expand on the existing Healthy Families America program in the state with the child abuse or child protection protocols to extend the age range that this could be a useful program. And hopefully, we know it's a very effective program for the families that it works with today. And hopefully by utilizing the changed protocols to serve more families, we'll see a great impact there. And a place where where a service like this often comes in is when you're talking about those young kids, substance exposed kids, either at birth or that we find out shortly after birth. This is a program that really can help with that population. And then the last that we've identified in kind of our initial round is this child parent psychotherapy. This also does exist currently within New Hampshire, although I think to really sustain this over time, we're going to have to be a little more intentional about what it is we're buying and what our expectations are and what it is we're paying. Because right now, operating a child parent psychotherapy program, it's more intensive and requires a higher level of training than traditional therapy, but it's really funded the same as any other traditional therapy. So that reality makes it somewhat unsustainable over time because you're pretty much just depending on the goodwill of a provider to continue to pay extra money and invest extra time into receiving this higher level of certification and training. So what we're hoping to do is be a little more intentional about the fact that this is what we're buying and being a little more intentional about paying a rate that's commensurate with what it actually costs to deliver that service so that we can sustain it over time. This is something that you'd often see, again, with young children. Typically, I think it's specifically designed for children under 5 to work with the parents and the child. You'll often see it used in situations where both the parent and the child have undergone significant trauma, such as situations where there's domestic violence in the home, but you have, say, one protective caregiver, and you really need to help the child and that protective caregiver work through that trauma and become, a stable family unit that can sustain without child protection being involved going forward. So that's the plan on the kind of preventative services side, that evidence-based service side. I'm really excited that we got this published back in December. I would recommend, I know I just glanced through it, but for folks who are interested, I would recommend you go back and read through kind of the process that we went to get to these decisions. We tried to be very thoughtful and deliberate in coming to these conclusions. I know that there's some frustration out in the world that some of these things have taken time to develop. And I share that frustration, and at the same time, I think it's important that when we're building a new system, which is what we're doing, that we're building a new system that's actually going to meet the needs and be successful, rather than just kind of throwing things out there that are that may or may not work, right? Because I know ultimately, if we build a system that's not going to work, we're going to lose support for building the system we're trying to build, and that's not going to help anybody. So that's kind of the prevention side of what we're doing for Family First. So I'll pause because I just spoke for a long time. I think you're muted, Senator.
Now it's my turn. Thank you very much, Mr. Ribson, for your presentation this morning. Judge Ashley has a question. Oh, sorry, that was me. Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Ribson?
I guess I would just like to throw in that I think in the midst of what we're going through with COVID and everything else, Joe, I think the progress that you have made, as long, as slow as it may feel at times, has been significant. And I think we're all of us that are working with kids and families are grateful for this forward movement and the positive outcomes that we anticipate. So thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Joe, I just, at some point, if you could send me a link to the documents that you referred, that you had up on the screen today, so I can get them out to the committee members, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Ribson? I'm seeing none. Thank you very much for your presentation this morning, Mr. Ribson. Nancy they're waving goodbye. Okay. So thank you and congratulations again on your national award. We're all very, very proud of you. So have fun with fiscal. Take care. Okay, I'm going to go back up to the number 2 agenda item, which is to elect a clerk. We need a clerk. I see Representative Rice going, oh my goodness, please, not me, not me. We really need to have a clerk here. I assigned someone the last time. I don't want to do that again. Is there someone who is willing to step forward and take the meeting minutes?
Senator Carson, oh, Mary Ellen's going to do it, okay.
No, you can do it,
Representative-
Kelly. I was going to do it because that's my buddy, but you can certainly do it.
Well, I just wanted to know, like, how thorough do you want these notes to be?
The minutes that we just had were extremely thorough, because I had asked Mr. Lapine to take them for me. I don't think they need to be in as deep a depth as they are. But I think because we're doing everything by Zoom, I think we can reference Zoom in the meeting minutes, because then that way anybody who wants to see exactly what the conversation was, they can just go and look at it on YouTube. So I think it's going to be mostly talking about, who's here, any roll call votes that were taken, just a very brief synopsis of what was talked about.
And what's the turnaround time to get those minutes out?
I think we had made a decision that we were going to meet every other month. So I would see if we could get the meeting minutes at least 2 weeks prior to the next meeting, because then that way people will have time to look at those meeting minutes. We've got to get them up on the website as well, and take it from there.
Well, I'm happy to do it, but I don't want to take it away from Mary Ellen.
Mary Ellen's going, no. Okay, so we have to, there's been a nomination of Deli Champagne. Is there a second? We have to.
Oh,
Second.
Yeah,
second.
so we it seems like we have a unanimous second, but we need to do a roll call. So I'm going to go ahead and call the roll. Senator Carson, yes. Representative Rice.
Yes, and thank you.
Representative Litchfield.
Yes.
Okay. Representative Altschiller.
Yes, but at these meetings, I'm here in my capacity representative from the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, just to be
Yes.
clear. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know, but it's
Still here.
calling you by your official title.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Senator.
Judge Ashley.
Yes.
Okay. Michelle Wangren.
Yes.
Okay. Nancy Rollins.
Yes.
Okay. Marcia Sink.
Yes.
Okay. Joy Barrett.
God bless you, Deli. Yes.
Okay. Mary Ellen McKay.
Oh, God, yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we have elected a clerk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deli.
For stepping forward. Really appreciate that. And I will be in touch with you about all the things that have happened this morning. Okay, the other thing that we need to discuss is number 4, concerning the appointment of other members. We have had a change in leadership in both the House and the Senate. So I think that there is going to be some reappointments on both sides. We do have a couple of open positions, basically concerning the chiefs of police. We've got to get some folks in on that position as well. So I will be working on that, and I'll be working with probably Representative Rice on the legislative members. That I see Representative Rice's dog is there. I put my dogs downstairs because they like to come and they'll get up here and all you see is dog noses everywhere. They want to be included in everything. So I just wanted to update everyone on that. So I'm hoping that when we meet again in March, we will have a full contingency of folks. I've also, just to let you know, I took and taking just some very brief notes that there seems to be that the people would like to do a deeper dive into behavioral health. And so I'm going to see if at our next meeting we can do that, because I think it's very, very exciting based on the conversations that we've had this morning, that the state is really moving forward in focusing on the behavioral health issue. And it would behoove the commission to really do a deep dive on these services. So I will be working on that as we move forward. So are there any questions on the assignment or reassignment of members at this point? Deli?
Yeah, I did see an email that Anna Kerrigan was no longer going to be serving on the commission. Will we be able to fill her slot and bring on another advocate?
I believe we will, but I have not seen that email.
Oh, it came,
So
I thought it came from your office. Someone from your office.
I don't think so, because I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I haven't seen it. The last time this happened, it was a disaster. People were replaced. They weren't informed. We just had an issue this morning with that as well. So we've got to do better about it. And so I will be working with both the Senate and the House members and the governor's office to see if we can get this straightened out. And so in March, we can just move forward with everyone being assigned. But I will reach out to find out if Ms. Corrigan has been replaced.
So, Senator Carson,
Yes.
to that point, I'm more than willing to draft some rules of procedure for the commission that would talk about membership, would talk about, terms, that would talk about setting expectations for members, the chair, the vice chair, so forth, setting agendas, scheduling. I've done that for other, local town government committees. It might be helpful in terms of keeping track of things.
Yeah, I think so. It's just difficult with Zoom.
Yep.
Because we're not actually in Concord. The contact that we have with our staff is minimal because they're all working remotely and they're not in the office as well. So they don't have access to records or files or anything else at this point. Plus, my aide has changed. I have Ms. Kroniak again. So
yes, nice to see her back.
Yeah, it is. It's very good to see her back. So things have it's just in that time period where things are just kind of in flux, I guess is probably a good way to put it. But I think that's a great suggestion, Nancy, and I really appreciate it.
Well, especially since this isn't a typical legislative committee,
right?
Because it has members from so many different areas, it might be helpful to have those rules of procedure.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's a great idea. Okay, are there any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move on, and we're going to recognize Myra O'Neill, who is the Director of the Office of Child Advocate, and she's going to give us an update. Good morning, Ms. O'Neill.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Senator Carson. It's great to see everyone this morning. And just a couple of points. I think that the email that Deli Champagne mentioned was an indication that the organization for which Ms. Kerrigan works with no longer is in operation, but it didn't say anything about whether she was on the commission anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Our email keeps bouncing back when we communicate with folks. And so you asked me on the budget, on the agenda today to talk about the Office of the Child Advocate's budget. And if it's okay with you, I prepared just a couple of slides because
sure.
I want to, in order to talk about the budget, I just need to give you a sense of the workflow, if that makes sense to you, so you can understand why we need what we need. So is that visible to everyone?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And I'd also like to just make this comment because the Office of the Child Advocate is an unusual kind of organization. Every state that has one always sort of struggles to make sure everybody understands the office. But listening to Director Ribson this morning and all that is rolling out, was really a gratifying experience for me. And I should mention also that Emily Lawrence is with me here today in case you have questions for her. I'm sure Emily was feeling the same thing, and that a lot of what we're hearing Mr. Ribson talk about are things that the Office of the Child Advocate had some influence on. So in our very first annual report, we talked about children in residential care, and we also talked about children on the juvenile justice side, and started to see that we really needed to focus on the behavioral and mental health needs of kids who ended up in residential care and weren't necessarily getting what they needed. We brought Patrick McCarthy to town. He was the former president and CEO of Annie E. Casey Foundation. He talked about what juvenile justice could look like. One of his primary recommendations was that we bring multisystemic therapy to town, that we stop using residential care. And then we, on a tip from Senator Reagan, who had been in touch with Multisystemic Therapy, the organization that provides that, we got in touch with them, we brought them to town. And so to hear Director Ribson say that they've got this broad redesign of residential care, they've got multisystemic therapy coming to town, they've got ways to really support families and more importantly, just support young people. And we had a hand in that. We were able to bring some of those issues to the forefront so people saw them, and we were able to support Mr. Ribson when things came time to discuss allocations of funds and stuff with the Finance Committee. So that's all the work. I'm looking around at the faces on this committee. Many of you, particularly you, Senator Carson, who sponsored the original legislation for this office to come into being. Like, this is the fruition of all of your work over these years, and it's just really gratifying. Today's a great day, and it's also a Friday, so we can celebrate all weekend about it. So I just wanted to give you a quick sort of view of what the work we are. You guys are always so good with your time, and I don't want to take too much of it today, so I thought I'd use a slide to give you some numbers to give you a sense of what we've been doing. This is from the past 3 months. This is just the beginning of our reporting period. We've taken in 100 citizen complaints, which are cases that we're managing. We've received 450 incident reports. We've done 25 critical incident reviews of those incidents that are higher level, that come with special attention. Those include 7 child deaths, all of which the cause and manner are still pending. So there's not a lot that we still know about them, but we know whether or not there are other needs in the families where those children have been lost. We're monitoring 26 investigations by DCOF of residential facilities. We're watching to see that they're doing them well, and when issues come up that we're concerned about, we're able to bring that to DCOF's attention. We're monitoring the 74 children we know of so far who have been infected by COVID-19. Those are only DCYF placed children. There are many more. These are largely children in congregate settings. And we're very concerned about the long-term effects of COVID-19 about children. So we're looking at how the department is responding and making sure kids are kept safe. On a happy note, we received $15,000 in CARES Act funds, and we're putting together COVID-19 survival kits for all of the children who are in residential care right now. We've got our hallway here lined with all sorts of wonderful stuff like warm, cozy blankets and comfy socks and postage page postcards that kids can use to write to people that they're not able to see right now. Lots of games and other things to keep kids busy and feel a little bit better about these tough times. Joe didn't mention the probation transformation project that's underway. Judge Ashley is part of that. We registered over 500 people to be at a meeting next week to talk about how probation is going to transform here in the state. And a lot of that is going to feed into the redesign of care that Joe just described, and in the build out of community services. All of that is allowing us to probably divert a good proportion of kids out of juvenile justice in the coming years based on that. And we're still working on organizing a voice for children in juvenile justice. We've had some good talks recently with funders that may be able to support some of the work that we're going to do, getting kids out to be able to talk about their experience. In terms of our larger reviews and reports, we have a system learning review summary that will come out at the end of January. That's about 4 system learning reviews we did on 4 children. One was on a child who was abruptly removed from foster care. One was about a child who had very chronic needs over 6 years and many critical incidents. One was about a child who was restrained in a facility for 80 minutes in a prone position. And the 4th one was a child who, I'm blanking. Emily, maybe you could jump in and remind me who the 4th child was. Anyway, that report will be out in mid-January. We're working on an addendum to the Restraint and Seclusion report that we brought out last January. And before we do that, we're examining the data that we have been collecting. We're finally getting all of these incident reports coming to us, and we're planning to invite to a meeting DCYF, the Bureau of Children's Behavioral Health, the Disability Rights Center, all the folks who are concerned about kids being restrained and secluded, to have a meeting to sort of see what progress we've made so far and where we need to go next. And we still hope to get out our summary of the facility review at Nashua Children's Home in the near future. These are the things that we pretty much have on hold because we've been sort of overwhelmed with the expansion of our jurisdiction in 21V. And also the pandemic has diverted some of the work that we're doing. And we've also had people who have been out because of the pandemic. So and this is sort of why we need to look at building our staff out a little bit. So we've been very busy with the probation reform project. We haven't met with the Juvenile Justice Working Group in a while. We still have a great deal of outreach and education that we have to do on the expansion of our jurisdiction. But there's also general things we need to do with making more connections in the community and certainly with children. The new statute requires that we actually visit children in residential facilities. We haven't been able to do that physically, but we are setting up. We've had a few, and we're trying to set up routine remote meetings with children who are in facilities so that they can know more about us and we can know more about them. We've reduced the number of system learning reviews that we do from 4 from what we had intended was about 6 a year. We'd like to do a child impact study that looks at how the budget is taking children's needs into consideration and making sure that there's a fair distribution of resources for children. And that will also help with the preventative aspects of the state being involved in children's lives. There are several issue briefings and system reviews that we'd like to do. One on conduct disorder and a review about how the state is responding to children's behavior. As we build out behavioral health systems, we're worried that we're leaving behind some of the children who have behavior for different reasons other than mental illness. And it's important to really understand that there's a number of children who are actually not able to access services because they carry this diagnosis of conduct disorder, which is a very controversial disorder. We'd like to look more closely at crossover. We've collected cases of children where they are really child protection concerns, and when things can't be resolved with the family, the fix is to shift the children over to juvenile justice. You've heard me speak about that before. We'd like to do more case reviews of the children who are boarding in emergency departments. You've heard that there was a record setting this past fall and summer of the number of kids who are boarding in emergency departments. We think some of them may be child protection cases and not necessarily children's mental illness exacerbating. And we need to know more about them, but we are also working with a group of advocates and providers to try to create some bridging the gap services for kids while they're waiting for all of the community-based services to roll out. I would like to look more at the long-term implications for children in COVID-19. Now that we have expanded jurisdiction, we need to be looking at restraint and seclusion in schools. There's not a lot of oversight on that. We've had some good conversations with the Department of Education, but that really is local and no one's really watching that. And also we expect that there's a great deal of problems with children accessing special ed during the pandemic. So that, if you take a deep breath, that's sort of where we are and what we're doing. That gives you a good, a sense of what it feels like to wake up in the morning and come to work at the Office of the Child Advocate. There's always plenty to do. Are there any questions about the things that we've been doing or before I launch into the budget?
Myra, this is Senator Carson. I want to thank you for looking into the special ed issue. If there's one thing that I've heard consistently since we got into the age of COVID, has been the problems with the special ed. Many parents have contacted me that their children were not receiving services. Their children have fallen behind. And I know school districts are trying to do the very best that they can with the resources that they have. But I think we have, in my personal opinion, we have a higher duty to these kids. And I think in many instances, they are being left behind. And so I'm glad that your office is going to take a look at that.
Thank you, Senator Carson. And I'll just emphasize that we hope to, if we're able to get the resources together to do that. But we also really need to respond to it as soon as possible, because as you say, children are losing grounds. I think across the board, we're looking at a whole generation of kids who are considerably set back. But the children with special ed services really aren't getting what they need. We've got to get them back into school, and we've got to get those services up and running. And it's, we've been sort of advocating for folks who are talking about the public health side of it. The children we're talking to are really frustrated with adults who are not wearing masks and are not protecting, taking the measures they need to do. When you look at the statistics around transmission of the virus, it's not happening in schools. Kids are showing us that they can wear masks and they can follow the protocols. It's adults that are putting them at risk, and we really need to pull that together. So we're really pleased to see that the governor did make a mask mandate, and we need to be thinking everything we do is affecting them, and particularly, as you say.
Moira, this is Mary Ellen. May I ask you a question that's kind of a comment and a question? I'm really glad to see you are looking at restraints and seclusion. And when you look at that, could you also almost kind of come down with what constitutes, seclusion, restraint? People, parents have a better viewpoint on, but seclusion, they do not. Yeah. And so when they take a child and they isolate that child who should be, included in the classroom, I don't think parents are aware until it gets to the end where something happens, as opposed to maybe at the beginning when parents should question why that removal has happened and why that seclusion is happening. That's one comment I have to be honest. Like Senator Carson mentioned with special ed, this comment has been, and this issue has been brought up for years, way before COVID even thought of happening. So now I'm hoping, with fingers crossed, you're going to have some kind of ability to actually help, just kind of identify what truly is seclusion.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is really important. The good news, we think, is that in residential facilities, it appears that the use of seclusion has dropped significantly. And we do have it on our to-do list to talk with Nancy Rollins about what is happening at Easter Seals, because the numbers are so low if they're secluding at all. But still, we temper that conclusion, because we are finding in some places that there's sort of workarounds to what the definition of seclusion is. And there are still children being removed to other places, and there may be a staff with them, so it doesn't meet the true definition of being secluded, but they are still prevented from leaving a room. And in some cases, we're finding that restraints are happening because the removal has provoked the child. And so it gets deeper. We are looking at it, but we feel that as we're able to look at this data now that we're receiving these reports, we can bring it to people's attention. We've been sending alerts to facilities that have a high number of restraints, so that there's just a more of awareness and people are thinking a little bit more about it. We're also able to look at what time of day is this happening, what's happening, so we can start to understand that a little bit more. But it is pretty, it does look promising that seclusion is really reducing significantly. The RFPs that Director Ribson described to you for the redesign in residential care also requires that facilities use the 6 core strategies, which is designed to reduce, if not eliminate, both restraint and seclusion. So there's definitely a commitment to doing that. But where we see our workload potentially increasing is, as you say, what's happening in schools, because there hasn't been, a deep look at that. And we're even going to have some trouble figuring out, who do we talk to and where do we get that information because of all the numbers of school districts. We complained last year that the department's report on restraint and seclusion was all aggregate data and you couldn't really understand it. But the Department of Ed's report on restraint and seclusion is even more watered down. It's just a number. You have no idea about the months of the year or anything. So we have a lot of work there, and that brings us to the budget and our need for staff. We have a frozen position for a data analyst, and to be honest, we don't have the capacity to really dig through that kind of data now until we can fill that position. But we will learn a lot from it going forward. Okay, so shall I jump into the budget now?
Maura, before you do that,
Sure.
What's the time frame of that first slide that you showed? Like those children that died, 7 children, what was the time frame?
That's since October 1st, 2020. So
Thank
it'll
you.
last about 3.5 months.
Okay, thanks.
Not all of them have DCUF involvement. I think maybe about 2 do not. And as I said, they're all of their, so when we look immediately at reports of the deaths of children, largely to make sure that if there are surviving children, that they're safe and that DCUF is doing what they need to do with the family, and also providing grieving services, because some of those children are not necessarily DCUF involved, but obviously a terrible thing has happened. We look to see if law enforcement is involved, but we can't really determine how deeply we need to look until we get the autopsy to know, was this a death that was related to abuse or neglect or not? There are I think 2 deaths in those 7 that are still undetermined, but the circumstances were related to unsafe sleep practices. And we saw a number of those last year as well. And this is something that we've been urging the Department of Health and Human Services to do a lot more public service announcements and public education about how dangerous it is to put a child in an unsafe sleep environment. And in particular, to co-sleep with a child. This is a horrible loss for a family to experience, and it should be avoided as much as possible.
Okay. All right, why don't you continue on, Ms. O'Neill?
Okay, so now that you know how busy we are and how much more we need to do, if you look in the books right now, you'll see our current operating budget is at $401,000. That I put in red in the parentheses because we're actually operating off of much less, because we've had to cut many things like our travel. There's money in my salary that I don't actually get paid, about $20,000 worth. So that 441 is a little bit more. It's probably about maybe 410,000 actually on what we operate off of, but that's where we are. Our prioritized budget that we've put forward, which is all of the budget that we would need to be able to really meet all obligations, is the 800,000 budget. And I'll show you what that includes in just a second. The governor's target budget would probably keep us very flat. And the problem with staying where we are right now is that we have accrued some added expenses that we never had before from DOIT, from the Department of Administrative Services, that include, we're now in a building where we must pay rent. This building is fairly empty, so we don't have many people to share the maintenance costs with. There's a great deal of infrastructure improvements that have to happen for the IT operations. They need to lay down new cables or things like that that we're going to have to be paying for. And we were, if you recall, for 3 years, we were doing a pilot of the Salesforce platform for our case management system, and we now have to pay for that. So these are, so it's over $100,000 of charges that are now on that $441,000 budget that we didn't have to worry about before. So our current staffing, we have 4 full-time staff positions. My position, Emily Lawrence's position is Associate Child Advocate. Karen Kimmel is the Program Specialist. She runs the office. She was originally, her job description included a great deal of interaction with our constituents, but in the past year, although we're administratively attached to DAS, they have shifted us back to an individual agency. And so Karen has spent a good portion of her time, I would say 65 to 70% of her time is just on things like the budget and other operational things, administrative things. And then we have a new assistant child advocate and ombudsman role, which is Jason Taylor. Many of you have met. And we have a part-time temporary legal aide who helps with all of that data entry that we do. The money for that is about to run out. And so then, and we have, I mentioned before, a data analyst position that was frozen. We hadn't filled it in time, and it was frozen for the pandemic. So our prioritized requests that would have doubled our budget includes filling that data analyst position. It includes a second ombudsman position to be able to do the case management of all those cases and help on investigations. It includes replacing that part-time temporary legal aide who does the data entry with a full-time permanent position of a legal aide. And it would provide us with an office vehicle, which actually, it sounds like a great expense to buy a car, but what we pay in reimbursement for mileage is actually much higher. So because of the requirement that we keep our budget fairly flat and we have that extra $100,000 added onto our budget, we had to create 2 scenarios to present for what the governor is working through. And neither one of them is tenable. They both will devastate the office. In scenario A, we would reclassify 2 positions that are now full-time to part-time positions, because that would save on both salary and benefits. The requested legal aid would also be a part-time, but would be delayed a year before we filled it. The requested new ombudsman position would also go to part-time and would be delayed a year. And we would vacate this office and give up all the expenses associated with the office. And we would eliminate the request for the vehicle. So that's problematic because obviously we're losing staff that we need. And by going part-time, we'll probably lose those staff because those are people who rely upon full-time jobs. We can't combine that to a full-time position because the obligations of those positions are so different and both so important. In the scenario B that we proposed, we would vacate and freeze Emily Lawrence's position, the associate child advocate. We're not sure that we can do that because her position is now codified. But that was an option. The other was to freeze the data analyst position until 24, and then the 2 new requested positions again would be made to part-time, and they wouldn't come in until FY24. And there are some small cuts around the office, like eliminating the request for the vehicle. So that's really where we're at. So I'm happy to be able to share this with you, knowing how much work we've done, how much work we need to do, and how crippling it would be for our budget to be cut. Now, we know that this is just the beginning of the budget negotiations, and we still come before the legislature for them to work out through the various finance committees what this will be. But we are urging the governor to be sort of gentle with this office. We understand that there are cuts being made across the administration. All agencies are asked to make significant cuts. But as we're so small, what we are is what we are, and to lose anything would be really devastating. we're finding that in addition to the expanded jurisdiction, which is mandated by the statute, we're also seeing an increased need for our attention because of the pandemic. And we're seeing a heightened level of concerns around abuse, neglect of children. And we're just reminded of why the office exists in the first place, was the result of things that went bad based on austere budget cuts that happened, 10, 11 years ago. So we're sort of recycling back to that. So my plea to the Oversight Commission is to support us with recognizing, what do we need to be able to function and to be able to meet the mandates of the statute and advocate on our behalf.
Okay, thank you, Mara, for that update. And we'll follow closely as we go through the budgeting process. Are there any questions, Nancy?
Yeah, Maura, with the legislation that expanded jurisdiction, was there a fiscal note attached to that?
There was not in the end. Originally, in the first year, Senate Bill 295 did have a fiscal note for 2 positions. And then the House Finance Committee put those two positions in. If you recall, Senate Bill 295 was held over to the next session. So we did get those 2 positions, but and that one of them is Jason Taylor in the ombudsman role, managing all of the cases coming in. And the other is that data analyst that we weren't able to fill. If you'll recall, there was a veto. There were great delays in getting us up and running on the budget and the HR thing. So by the time we were ready we started posting that job, it got frozen.
So the positions remained, but the funding was removed from the final piece of legislation.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, it was a budget. It was a frozen budget cut, and then it was a lapse.
And then I just want to make a comment to remind people that the costs that have been incurred by the Office of Child Advocate in terms of rent and all of those other accoutrements was not of their doing. They were asked by the Department of Health and Human Services to vacate the former building, the Anna Philbrick building, and give up their office space in order for DHHS to create new transitional beds for adults. So just want to underscore that was not their decision. And so at that very least, that should be funded. If not these additional, from my perspective, if not these additional positions.
And I would support Nancy's statement. And I think that gives a very good case for getting at least reimbursed or expanding the budget to accommodate the cost of rents that they hadn't anticipated. So, okay, are there any further questions? I think Representative Altschiller, you had your hand up.
I'm unmuted. Great. So am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. I'm curious, and thank you, Nancy, for pointing out that the move was not something that was initiated by Dr. O'Neill and her staff. And I'm curious, Dr. O'Neill, if you have had any communications from any other, from the state about there being some open space available so that your office does not have to incur another rent or build out or modification of space that you are now on your own in finding? Like, how is this, how will this play out?
Thank you. It is not anything we have any control over. And the way it's been explained to us, we are a separate agency, even though we're administratively attached. And wherever we go, we would pay rent. And we can't seem to get an explanation of why we didn't pay rent for 3 years, because I was told in the beginning that we didn't pay rent. We did look at the statute again. The part about agencies that are administratively attached. There is an expectation that we would pay the department we're attached to for some services with an agreement written in some sort of an MOU, which we do not have at this point. So that's something to sort of discuss. The the commissioner at DAS has been out for a while, so we can't have further discussions. But he did make it pretty clear when we made this move that we would pay rent wherever we were. I think that the DAS has sort of tightened up with all of the people that they're working with and reporting, and they're charging rent across the board. And then the other problem with this particular building is that it's an old building. This is Johnson Hall. And so all of the technology here has to be replaced. There's some very expensive work that has to be done. And the floor that we're on is essentially empty aside from us. And so we have to carry a greater load of the cost of these changes, which isn't something that a small office like us can really sustain.
Thank you for the clarification, and I look forward to hearing the update on where there might be some other space in a place that already has technology ready. I can think of a half a dozen agencies that probably have some space. So
thank you. We are a complicated agency to place because we are an oversight agency, so we can't be in DHHS buildings. That's been a problem from the beginning. We can't be housed with the people we oversee, and so that has given a particular sort of headache for DAS to find a place. And these offices are actually fairly nice, but they're turning out to be expensive in a way we didn't anticipate.
I'm curious, are there any other agencies like on Hazen Drive? Like there's no reason why you necessarily couldn't share space in the DOT where there's no crossover for any of the things that you do. And they are all wired up. You know what I'm saying? Like there are other agencies that have buildings that are fully functional, don't require the kind of retrofitting that you're being asked to do, which I'm really disturbed to hear that you've been put in the position of having to do this, because it seems like I'll go out on a limb here and say that seems like a design to fail situation. And I'm unhappy about that completely. So I'd like to hear where there are what other agencies could take you in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We can certainly ask about that. I do think that Commissioner Arlinghouse and his team worked pretty hard to find a place to accommodate us. And so it's just hard to know, what it all means and but I think no matter where we end up, we will be paying rent. We may not have those kinds of retrofitting fees, but we are paying, and we're also paying higher IT fees that we didn't anticipate. And that's also an issue because we have a non-functioning case management system and we're unable to report any of our data because we've been waiting for 3 years for that to be retrofitted. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, all of the Salesforce related IT has been transferred over to working on pandemic issues and now vaccines and stuff. So we're looking at another vendor for our case management system that may be more functional, but the way money is allocated in the state, it's complicated.
No kidding.
Okay. Are there any further questions for Ms. O'Neill? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for your updates this morning. If you can send a link to the slides that you put up this morning, that would be terrific.
Sure. Thank you so much. Everyone have a good weekend.
You too. We're going to hear from Judge Ashley.
Thank you, Senator. So I'm going to share my screen. I do have some slides and we'll see if this is going to work. Where is my document? Can folks see?
Not yet.
Nope, not yet.
Okay, so everyone can see this slide?
No.
No, that did not work. Okay, let me try again. Where's my doc? That's really unfortunate. How about now?
Yes, there we go.
Excellent.
We got it.
Thank you. Okay. So I've been asked to provide a brief presentation on the Family Treatment Court that will be starting in Sullivan County. And so I'm going to go through this, trying to be as brief as I can. And so I don't know how familiar everyone in the on the commission is with adult treatment court, which occurs in all of our counties with the exception of Sullivan County in New Hampshire. And these are for felony criminal cases. But it has been longstanding in New Hampshire since starting in Stratford County back in 2005. This is a little bit different. This is a family treatment court. So what is family treatment court? This is a quote that I pulled from the Family Treatment Court Planning Guide. It's pretty wordy. I'm not going to read through all of it, but essentially it's a concise explanation that family treatment court is an effort to essentially provide an opportunity for parents involved in abuse and neglect cases to reunify with their children, to do so by gaining the skills that they need, the services that they should have in order to be healthier and provide a safe environment for their children. The purpose of having the court involved is to really have that collaborative relationship for these families to manage the needs that they have when they are involved with abuse and neglect cases. And then in an overarching level, a treatment court brings together professionals who are on interdisciplinary levels to work together to try to address the very complex issues that these families are facing in these cases. So this screen is really our flow chart for how family treatment court works. In a nutshell, the goal again is to connect each family member actually, to appropriate services early. And that really is the key, each family member early, and then to adjust that as it goes along. So there's a screening of all abuse and neglect cases that may possibly be appropriate for family treatment court, and then there'd be a referral into family treatment court. There is an intake that is done and case plan created for those families, and that includes the parent, child, and then other folks who are connected to the families. There are regular meetings and there are regular court sessions with a consistent judge. And this is a key part of all treatment courts, whether it is adult drug court, mental health courts, veterans treatment courts, etc. It's the same with family treatment courts, is that regular court sessions. And then the key component really is the therapeutic responses to the behaviors. So again, that's a consistent treatment court aspect, but very important in abuse and neglect cases. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Moving forward, when a family is in family treatment court, there would be the continual adaptation of services and the plan, and of course, an assessment as we go along for incentives for those parents and adjustments to be made, and then ultimately ending in an appropriate permanency plan being implemented for the child, which of course we always hope is reunification, but if it is not reunification, what that appropriate plan should be for the child and the parents. So some features of family treatment court. This slide really covers the similarities to adult drug court and any differences from adult drug court. So again, similarity provides that intensive team case management. I don't know why I'm having such a trouble clicking here. Okay. It initiates close in time incentives and sanctions for parent behavior. I'm just going to mention here, some of you are keenly aware of the abuse and neglect sequence of events when there's a court-involved family, others maybe not. But essentially, when a abuse and neglect petition is filed, there's a preliminary hearing basically within a week. And then there's a trial on the abuse and neglect petitions, or an adjudicatory hearing, generally within 30 days. So very quickly that happens. And then after there is a finding, there's a dispositional hearing within 30 days. And then we have 3-month review hearings up until the permanency hearing 12 months out. So we can lose a lot of parents in those early stages if they're not immediately involved in treatment. And so this model is going to be very front-loaded. It is intended to connect with parents early and often and make sure that they understand the need to be focusing on treatment, on their children's needs, and keep them involved and keep the court connected with them so that they can be more successful. So it engages the parent in drug testing, in treatment quickly, and provides that regular point of contact with the judge. Differences from adult drug court. And again, for those who are specialists in adult drug court in New Hampshire, these are some key differences. So of course, we're not talking about criminal cases. I have long since had parents involved in neglect cases who ask me, can't I get into drug court because I hear that's really helpful for folks? And I say, not without committing a felony, and we don't want you to do that. So there really has been that barrier, and this is an opportunity for parents involved in abuse and neglect cases who are struggling with substance abuse to have that kind of benefit. These are confidential cases that requires some differences, really, that are going to be fleshed out as we start to plan our treatment court in Sullivan County. The management team is different. The players are different. There is not a prosecutor and defense lawyer and probation officer who are involved in the treatment team as there is in adult drug court. For these teams, you have, of course, the judge and the parent attorney involved, but it's child welfare. So DCYF is at the table. Guardians ad litem are at the table. And of course, the child service providers are at the table. And then the time frame. This is a huge issue. I can say that drug treatment court professionals will commonly indicate that it takes at least a year for folks to successfully complete drug court. However, federal requirements and certainly state requirements are that parents need to correct the conditions of neglect within 12 months. So there is definitely a need to, again, as I said, front load this, try to get folks into treatment as early as possible to have them achieve reunification. It engages the whole family in services, certainly much more than adult drug court does, which focuses on the individual. And again, the family's involved in the case planning. So just a couple of components of research on family treatment courts that have shown their success, that when a child's needs are supported alongside the parent's need, that parent is much more likely to be engaged with their recovery and be able to recover. It's shown that there are fewer days in out-of-home care when folks are involved in family treatment courts. There's a greater likelihood of reunification with the children, and fewer kids ultimately are involved in a criminal justice system at later dates. So just a brief overview of the grant that we have received for family treatment court. So this is a 3-year grant. So essentially, the Department of Justice did post an opportunity for there to be grant funding for folks to initiate family treatment court and also expand best practices around the state. New Hampshire is one of a handful of states in the country that does not have a family treatment court. So we are not early to the table on this. We are one of the last states, and it's certainly high time that New Hampshire does establish a family treatment court. So this is the opportunity to do that. Strangely, particularly in these times of budgetary issues, I think that there were not as many applicants as they anticipated, probably because so many states have done this already, that the opening offer of a $1 million grant over 3 years, which we applied for in March, right in the crux of the pandemic, they contacted us in June to say, would you be interested in more money? So of course we said, yes, that would be helpful. And so it's now a $1.7 million grant funding that we have received, and it's over a 3-year period. The first year is the assessment and planning year, and that's where we're in the midst of right now. The second year will be the actual implementation of the family treatment court in Sullivan County and monitoring. And through the last year of the grant will be evaluation of how it has been going and identifying the best practices so that we can spread either family treatment courts or the best practices involved in the treatment courts to other areas of the state and other case types even. So how this is going to work essentially is there are 3 teams. There's an oversight team, which is really the state level officials involved. There's a steering team, which is more what we call sort of mid-management folks. And then ultimately there is going to be an implementation team. And that will be our local folks running the family treatment court. That implementation team has not been formulated yet because we haven't established the family treatment court in that. So many of the folks who are on our steering team will be part of that implementation team. Obviously, the important players on these teams, DCYF, and both the case managers and attorneys. Birth parent attorneys will be important. This will be a challenge in New Hampshire because we don't have the same umbrella organization that we do for public defenders in criminal cases. So it's easy to have a representative at the table for defense counsel in our adult treatment court. All of our parent attorneys in New Hampshire are essentially contract attorneys who are paid by the hour to participate and represent these folks, and not paid very much. There hasn't been a change in their funding in 25 years. So it's going to be difficult to have that representation at the table. It's going to be an issue we're going to have to address somehow. CASA and Guardians Ad Litem will be at the table, and our family service providers, treatment providers as well. But there's a broader reach that we want to tap into: community groups, police department, the local police department, the House of Corrections is going to be an important ally, certainly in Stratford, Sullivan County, and then schools and other government agencies. We really want to tap into all of the resources and get input in many places. There'll be services regularly provided for these families involved. The first list is really sort of the universal services that we anticipate for any family involved in a family treatment court in Sullivan County, and that'll include the child's therapeutic appointments, substance abuse treatment or indoor mental health treatment for the parents. There'll be LADAC counseling, drug testing, again, parent individual therapy and parenting classes. There'll also be some additional services as appropriate that we anticipate. So family therapy, transportation, we expect is always an issue, housing. Peer support is going to be a huge part of this, I anticipate. And then educational supports, as well as services for foster families who are caring for the children who may have need for additional support. So back to our timeline, just touching on this when we actually have the family treatment court up and running. So families who do not participate in family treatment court, of course, they have a DCYF caseworker who manages the case, and the birth parents are generally given contact. So they're given a list of folks to call. Whether they're capable of doing that or actually do that, it shows in the levels that we have for compliance by parents. Services may include substance abuse treatment or mental health, of course, in a regular case. As I mentioned in the time frame, those parents meet with the judge generally 4 to 6 times before the permanency hearing. And the incentive is really just the reunification, and it's not a lot of incentives along the way. Family treatment court is a little bit different. There's a team involved, so it isn't just one DCYF worker trying to manage the very complex needs of these families. The whole family is involved, and this is a phrase that you've all seen before, that sort of warm handoff to services. This can make all the difference for a family who's involved with a case like this and is suffering from substance abuse and or mental health issues. Trying to get connected to those services, so much gets lost if there isn't that handoff. And if that can happen, we expect much more success. The services may also include housing, transportation, and educational assistance. The birth parent, again, meets regularly with the judge. That is different from regular court. And there will be incentives along the way for positive behaviors, again, encouraging parents to be successful. So these next couple of slides are really talking about the far end of our treatment court grant. We anticipate there may be the desire to expand family treatment court beyond Sullivan County. And we'll look at that. But we also anticipate that we are going to discover best practices that will help us in the non-family treatment court abuse and neglect cases. That may also be of assistance to court cases that include divorce parenting cases, domestic violence cases, our juvenile delinquency and CHINS cases, and in criminal cases. There's a lot of we tend to even as a court work in silos. So Superior Court has a defendant who's involved in adult drug court. The family's also involved in abuse and neglect cases. We're not talking to each other because our case is confidential and I can't share that and they're doing their thing. We need to sort of break down that a little bit and have more cross communication. Okay, next slide. Again, I talked a bit about this already, modifications in other systems. Just again, trying to weave together what is going to work well, and if we can pilot this in Sullivan County and see what takes, what doesn't take, before we try to broaden it across the state, that is really what the grant is designed to do. A brief word about why we're in Sullivan County. There are two circuit courts in Sullivan County, the Claremont Family Division, Newport Family Division. They're fairly close geographically. And the anticipation is to be able to draw all of those cases into family treatment court in front of the same judge. So what we have, and this is a huge key issue, is that we do have Judge Jasinski in Claremont Family Division now, who is would be able to pull in the Newport cases. He has several decades of experience with these cases and is going to be a strong force in this family treatment court. The police there are on board. They are interested in this process. Dartmouth Hitchcock is close by, not in Sullivan County, of course, but the doorway program there. They are the local doorway and is going to be a key component for a resource for this project. And TLC is the Recovery Support Center up in Sullivan County. They are on board and we hope to be able to expand services. There are certainly some needs in Sullivan County and a reason why we're starting there. They have almost double the ratio of abuse and neglect cases to their population. There's definitely an uptick in infants born substance exposed, whereas New Hampshire in general had a decrease. So there's that need. There's been a resurgence of bath salts in that region. And again, there have been fewer services available, so the lists have been longer. So that's certainly an area that we want to address through this treatment court pilot. The first few months, I know I want to try to whip through these slides. We're still waiting impatiently for the federal release of the funds. So we haven't been able to hire our coordinator yet, which means that one of our court administrators, Heather Culp, has been taking the lead amongst all of the other duties that she has. And so we're looking forward to being able to move forward with that coordinator, which will be a huge impact on this, moving it forward. We have a steering committee and our oversight committee who have both met at least twice, and we have meetings that we are putting on the books for that. We have established a timeline for what we intend to accomplish in the first year. We are setting up times in the next about 4 to 6 weeks to observe other family treatment courts in 2 other states, one in New York and one in Iowa. Of course, the pandemic is actually helping us with this because we can do that remotely. And to bring a team to these other states would certainly be a higher cost. So we're able to do that remotely and look forward to learning a great deal about how they operate their treatment courts so that we can make the best plan for New Hampshire. We're meeting with local stakeholders and beginning a resource map, which will tell us what we have in Sullivan County and what we need in Sullivan County. And then trying to establish the beginnings of what the criteria will be for these cases coming into family treatment court. And then the last slide, I'll just not go through, but these are some resources for folks who might want to get really in depth on family treatment court. They're long documents, but certainly I will send the link to this PowerPoint on to you all, so you'll be able to have that to take a look at. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions that folks may have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Judge. I want to make sure I'm not on mute. Okay, yep. Thank you very much, Judge. Representative Altschiller has a question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator, for recognizing me, and Judge Almy, that was tremendous. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to taking another look through those slides. I appreciate how quickly, succinctly you put everything. I'm curious as to what role Turning Points Network will play in assisting with families who go through this new pilot program, particularly as, you know, we have been uncovering through the work here and in other spaces, the very close alignment with substance misuse disorders, family issues, and trauma, and how the crisis centers are going to be integrated into working with survivors and people who are coming through these courts.
So the goal essentially, and I'm not sure I'm going to precisely answer your question, but the idea behind the family treatment court is to be assessing these individuals, the individual parents and the family as a whole as they come through the door, and try to capture all of what their needs are, and then direct them to the appropriate treatment that they may need. So of course it's going to be individualized. It always has been individualized, but the idea behind a family treatment court is to really assist much more quickly getting these folks in the door than they have been in the past. So the idea would be to make sure that the individual family members are getting the treatment that they need, and then can work toward a safe reunification, because that's always going to be the overarching issue in these cases. It isn't do this treatment so that you don't go to prison. You know, that's sort of the adult model. That isn't the circumstance at all for these cases. These are cases that come in and the goal is reunification. Now, there may be some circumstances where reunification isn't appropriate. And so, you know, we'll sort of put those in perhaps a different category. But do keep in mind that the anticipation of this is that this is going to be a voluntary request by the parents to enter into family treatment court and get these services. So we're going to have folks who are at least feeling as though they are ready to do this and receive the services. And there's going to be hiccups and there's be fallbacks and there'll be struggles. Absolutely, that's going to happen. But the idea will be that as the parent receives the treatment and the child is protected, that there are ways to make sure that while the parent becomes healthy on one front, they are also addressing any underlying traumatic needs that may exist. For instance, the child-parent psychotherapy, that is definitely an option that has been promoted by Dartmouth-Hitchcock. They have specialists there who are able to work on that. And so there's connections with some of their programs that we hope to tap into to be able to say, this is a family that really needs that service and that therapy. Once the parent is stable enough to be able to engage in that, of course, they have to be at some level of sobriety to be able to engage in those next steps.
Yeah, I would hope, I just want to make sure that the family violence prevention specialists who are already operating here in New Hampshire and operating in your courts too, who have that ability to work with families as confidential advocates, doing of that case management that you're talking about right now, are included as part of your core team, and that you are using that resource that we have been developing and training and making available to the state. And we're, you know, We've got a really great
Absolutely.
group of people. Yeah, they're
And I
ready.
will- I
This is
will
what we dreamed of. Yeah.
I will definitely, because one of the things that we're talking about right now is, do we have everyone at the table that we need to have at the table? So any further individuals and agencies and entities is exactly what we're looking at. There really can't be enough input at this point.
Count us in. Count us in. I will send you the contact information to make sure that they're on your list.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is great.
Okay, are there any further questions for Judge Ashley this morning? Marty and then Michelle.
Great. I just have a comment. As part of this group, we are so excited about this project and have been waiting a long time for it, I think, in New Hampshire. But I think what's also very exciting is there's so much great data to support the outcomes because so many other states have been using a family treatment court for so long. And one of the most astounding ones for me was learning, and this was just recent that I learned, that when a family becomes involved in a family treatment court, there was a decrease in children in that family who then become involved in our juvenile justice system. So that was just really eye-opening for me and something that is so positive for our families.
Okay, thank you, Marty. Michelle?
Yeah, I'm equally excited to hear about this, and thank you for this presentation. I was really excited to hear that these families may be able to access educational advocacy, as that's an area that when we get contacts at NHLA for educational assistance, there's just a dearth of assistance in that area. So I'm really interested to hear where those services are coming from, so that we can make sure that we're able to connect the families with those services. And potentially, I'm really excited that might expand throughout the state as well eventually, as it's so difficult for families to focus on what they need when kids are having so much difficulty in school.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just say that all of those lists of services that I've indicated is aspirational for what we hope and believe should be available to folks going forward. And it may be there. It's just not connected in the right way. And if it's not there, can we make it happen? So thank you for that.
Any support we can offer with that, I would love to try to make some connections and help out with that as much as possible, because that's a very difficult area for us to reach in that state. And I know that there's a huge need there.
Thank you.
Joy?
Thank you so much, Senator Carson. Thank you, Ashley, Judge Ashley, for that presentation. It's kind of nice to know what's going on in the state, and I know Marty has addressed it and spoken about it in other meetings. What strikes me, and maybe this is a good agenda item for a different conversation, but after learning about Families First from Joe, and of course this family court service that is striking up in Sullivan County. And I know the struggles that we have with mental health clinicians and the workforce for the CACs. It seems that there are all these really great projects, and it's all kind of coming to this place of really having a demand for mental and behavioral health, which in New Hampshire has become really challenging to have clinicians that want to do that work primarily with children, especially the children that, will be involved in a lot of these services that will need Medicaid reimbursement. And so I wonder if there's, an opportunity for a broader conversation of all these programs that have kind of have the synergy in that one problem that we're all going to have, which is being able to develop the workforce that can support these great programs moving forward. And I just wanted to kind of, present that, because all these programs are so great, but I think it's going to be really challenged with what we have here in New Hampshire. And I don't know, Deli, if this is something you even want to chime in about. I know that you've done, a lot of advocacy work with respect to the mental health 10-year plan and some of those programs, but.
Well, I think you nailed it, Joy. And I think a lot of it comes down to pay, pay increases. There's no other way to say it. We showed a documentary the other night about early childhood, and Alabama is #1 in the state for early childhood programs. And the #1 reason is because they're now paying their early childhood teachers the same that public school classroom teachers are getting. When you raise the pay, when there's parity, you see positive outcomes. So we know that needs to happen. We have to have that conversation. You're absolutely right. You said, I welcome an opportunity for a conversation. We have to keep having that conversation.
Okay. Are there any further questions for Judge Ashley? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Judge. We look forward to getting progress reports as this program rolls out. It truly is exciting to hear this. And if it works, then we can work on making it a program in every county. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is any legislative updates. I think I'll step in here. I understand that the House finally sometime this week just finally released all of their bills. And so I know that Representative Rice was here, but she had to leave because she had a meeting at 10. But in the Senate, today is the last sign-off day, so not all the bills have come out yet. So hopefully within the next 2 weeks, everything will be out. Everyone can see everything. I will tell you that I have filed legislation to create, to pull DCYF, juvenile justice, children behavior health, all of that out of DHHS and create its own agency. I did something like this before and I wasn't successful, but I think that quite frankly, with all the things that are happening right now, I think this is a good time to do this. So they will have their own standalone agency instead of being crowded in with DHHS. And I have been asked to sponsor, I think 2 bills on juvenile justice. They, I don't believe, have come out. I have signed off on them. So I think we're going to have a really good discussion about juvenile justice as well as we go through this session. I know that there has been a few bills also filed on the House side concerning juvenile justice. So again, I think this is going to be a good session for us to begin those conversations and to really start looking at what we're doing and how we can do things better. So hopefully at our next meeting, we can have a more robust discussion about these bills. They will be out. Some of them will have been heard already. And so it's just a question of getting them on the agenda so we can talk about them. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Deli?
Senator Carson, you referenced that first bill that you are sponsoring. Does that have a bill number yet?
No, it does not.
Okay.
It should by the end of today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, let's go to our setting the next meeting date. I'm looking at March because we had talked about every other month, and I'm looking at perhaps March 19th, which is the 3rd Friday. Does that give everyone enough time for scheduling? I'm seeing yes, thumbs up. Okay, so let's see if we can schedule the next meeting for March 19th at 9 o'clock. I imagine we'll still be Zooming by then.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just a question of making sure we can get the time to do that. And if there is any kind of change, I will email all of you and let you know that well ahead of time. So, okay, is there any other business to come before the commission this morning? Nancy?
It's come to my attention, apparently the National Association or the State Association of Social Workers have made a request to the Department of Health and Human Services Apparently, the DCYF child caseworkers and the juvenile probation officers are not clearly identified in terms of when they should receive the vaccine. I
Okay,
would suggest that we support that they be included in phase 1B. If they are doing direct care and face-to-face, they should be considered as much as our residential care workers or healthcare professionals working with clients in the community. So I think that we should make a statement to DHHS or to the governor's office to move them into phase 1B.
okay. Well, the new guidelines came out yesterday, and the governor announced them. I don't have the chart in front of me. I also sit on the governor's reopening task force, and I brought up yesterday that I had been contacted by pharmacists and pharmacy technicians that do not have direct contact with patients, but they do provide an essential service. And it wasn't clear as to when they were going to receive the vaccine. We had Patricia Tilley from DHHS, Department of Public Health, and unfortunately she was driving with her daughter out to Chicago. She was going back to school. She did not have that schedule in front of her. And she said when she got back, she would send it to me. I'll be more than happy to share it with the commission, but I know new guidelines were issued yesterday. So I don't have a problem if the commission decided that we wanted to support these folks and make sure they get included in 1B. So can I get just some very specific language? Because again, the commission will be the Oversight Commission for Reopening New Hampshire meets next Thursday. And as the chair of the Oversight Commission on Children's Services, I can bring that forward at that time. So is there some language? I see.
Do you want me to send you? I could rattle it off, or I could send it to you in an email, but my proposal is that we designate DCYF caseworkers and juvenile probation officers as being included in phase 1B for the vaccine distribution.
Okay, so that's DCYF caseworkers, and what were the other ones? Probation officers?
Probation officers.
Okay. Okay, to be included in phase 1B. Okay, I got it.
I'd like to add the family violence prevention specialists who work with the DCYF caseworkers who have been working with them all along at great risk.
Okay, and what is that group again? The family
Violence prevention specialists.
Violence prevention. Okay, specialists. Okay, so because we need to, yes, Marty.
Just a point of interest, Joe Ripsom and I have been on an email list together that came out of Dartmouth Hitchcock, and Dartmouth is looking at working towards ensuring that all CPSWs and assessment workers, in fact, do get a vaccine. I'm not sure the status of that, but just so you're aware that that is in the works. And they wanted to include CASA, and we said, let those folks get it first because they are having that more intense direct contact with families and children.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it, because I know that I do have a copy of it. It's just a question of me finding where it is in my email.
Dartmouth might be a good resource for you as well.
Yeah, okay, let's see. Okay, let's see what we got. No, okay, I can't, it's buried someplace in my email from yesterday. So I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe that the phase 1 was changed to include people 65 and older. So they lowered the age, and any other healthcare worker or people that are in contact with other people. So I'm thinking that maybe they're already going to be included in 1B, but I would rather get confirmation on that before I say something definitively. Myra?
Thank you. Thank you for discussing this. Our office has received a lot of of calls from not just caseworkers, but also from people in the administration at DCUF who are really worried about this. What they're asking for is to be classified as first responders and to get into that. They are not currently in the plan to get it. And I don't even think that there's any indication of when they will get it. But I think it's important to understand that what we're hearing is not so much, of course, they're worried about their own health, but most of the people contacting us are worried about being vectors to the families that they're visiting, going from house to house, unknowingly spreading that. And quite frankly, that puts the state at liability as well if they're around spreading. And so, and the other folks that apparently, Nancy Rollins, maybe you could speak to this, who aren't on the list are the folks working in residential treatment with these kids, and that the virus fly. But thank you for this. I can send you some information that we've put together to share with the governor and the commissioner. And we haven't got any response from them yet, but it's very concerning. Thank you.
Okay, so it seems like I've got a list here going of all these folks. Mary Ellen?
Thank you, Senator Carson. Yesterday, when the governor did announce the residential placements for individuals with developmental disabilities, and I think all of the residential placements are now in 1B. That was another addition, but I agree with Nancy that JPPOs and CPSWs absolutely should be included.
Okay, so we want to put together some sort of a statement that would encourage the governor to include DCYF caseworkers, the probation and probation officers, and people engaged in family violence and the family violence prevention specialists, to include those in the 1B vaccine schedule. Do I have that correct? Okay, so is there a motion to adopt that statement?
So moved.
Okay, that was moved by Nancy. Let me write this down.
Second that.
Okay, Nancy. And who was the second?
I was.
Oh,
Mary Ellen?
Yes.
Okay, I got
I
it.
defer to Mary Ellen.
Okay,
Thank
so,
you, Deb.
all right. So
Good
I
to see
need
you, Mary Ellen.
Is there any comments on the statement? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the roll. Senator Carson, yes. Let's see, Representative Litchfield.
Yes.
Okay, Representative Altschiller,
Yes.
Judge Ashley.
Yes.
Okay, Michelle Wengren.
Yes.
Okay, Nancy Rollins,
Yes.
Marcia Sink,
Yes.
Joy Barrett,
Yes.
Mary Ellen McKay,
Yes.
and Deli Champagne.
Yes.
Okay, so that passes unanimously, and I will write up a statement, and next week when we have the Oversight Commission, I will introduce the statement at that time. Okay, is there any other business to come before the commission? Okay, seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, and that was by Nancy.
Yep.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Mary Ellen, okay. I have to call the roll again. So Senator Carson, yes. Representative Litchfield,
Yes.
okay. Representative Altschiller,
Yes.
Judge Ashley,
Yes.
Michelle Wengren,
Yes.
okay. Nancy Rollins,
Yes.
Marcia Sink,
Yes.
Joy Barrett,
Yes.
Mary Ellen McKay,
Yes.
and Deli Champagne.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. We've had some interesting presentations this morning. And so everybody stay healthy, and we will see you in March. Take care.
Thank you, Senator.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Senator.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay.